Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and members of the press. I put that in myself for you. Good evening and welcome to the October meeting of the Borough Council's Planning Control Committee. I'm Councillor Deadman and I'm the chairman of this committee. Members and officers have their names in front of them for ease of reference, and I'm going to take a few minutes to explain the process that we work to in these committees. So the application will be presented by the appropriate case officer. After each presentation, those members of the public who have written to the council requesting to speak will be invited to take the seat at the opposite end of the table. The time allocation is 3 minutes for each speaker, and this will be strictly timed and enforced. The green light displayed on the front of the timer will change to amber when there is 30 seconds remaining, and then change to red at the end of the 3 minutes. The speeches must relate to material planning issues and must not be derogatory. No questioning is allowed, and no further written information, photographs, plans or other material can be submitted at this stage. And those applications on the agenda with public speakers will be dealt with first. However, we have no public speaker as far as we're aware tonight, so we will go in the order that it is on the agenda. If there are any questions, please speak to the officers or me or the Vice Chairman after the meeting. I hope this is superfluous, but if the meeting extends beyond 9 o'clock, I shall ask for a proposal from the members to extend the meeting to a specific time, and once that item under discussion at that time is resolved, the meeting will then be adjourned and will reconvene on another evening. So in order to assist the process this evening, I must ask everyone to ensure that mobile phones are either switched off or in silent mode, and also can everybody be very quiet whilst the meeting is in progress. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be filmed by the council and broadcast live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. If you're seated in the chamber, and as we can see tonight nobody is seated in the chamber, but it is possible that the cameras will capture your image. So by your presence you are deemed to consent to be filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and training purposes. If you address the committee, your contribution will be recorded and broadcast unless this is during a period when the meeting is in private session, as is permitted by the Access to Information provisions. As the chairman of the meeting, I can at my discretion terminate or suspend filming if in my opinion continuing to do filming would prejudice the proceedings of the meeting, or if I consider that continued filming might infringe the rights of any individual or breach any statutory provision. It now remains to point out the fire exits, which as we know are at either end of the room. I'm not going to do the trolley dolly thing. And so I think now it remains to start the meeting with the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence.
There are no apologies today, Chairman.
That's very cheering. We're all present. Declarations of interest, members. Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to make it known for openness and transparency that I attended a Residents Association meeting recently where item B, Avon Beach, raising of the beach, was brought up. I listened to a robust discussion that was had and I took no part in that discussion, only to reiterate to members or people sat around to say I cannot make an opinion because I sit on the planning committee. So just for openness and transparency, Madam Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Watts. I'm going to just refer it to my legal advisor. Yes, that's fine. Thank you very much for bringing it forward. Councillor Spittle.
Yeah. That should the meeting extend for any time, I would like to leave. I do need to leave at 20 to 8.
Thank you, Councillor Spittle. I'll take that on board. Thank you. Any more declarations of interest or pleas to leave early? Right, thank you. Item 3, the minutes. To confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the Planning Control Committee, which was held on the 14th of September this year, 2017. You've all read the minutes? Right, Councillor Smith.
Happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Hall.
I'm happy to second, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, councillors. Those are confirmed as the correct record. Item 4, right to receive written reports by the Development Management Manager on the following schemes, and we are going to go in the order in which it is on the agenda as we have no public speakers. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the press. As you can see before you, this application is for Avon Works at Bridge Street, just over the back from the offices here. It's changed use to the ground floor of the former Mostyn's workshop from a B1, B2 use to a mixed use comprising an A1 shop and retail warehouse, A3 cafe for the sale of food and drink, an ancillary B1 office and B8 storage facilities and associated alterations. This is a retrospective application, and you will note from your update sheet that we've amended the description to clarify that this is in relation to the ground floor only of the building in question. The reason for that I'll come on to in a moment. This is the building in question. The offices, civic offices are here, and we're sitting down here at the moment. Access is from Bridge Street to the premises. There's an area of hard standing around the building, which acts for public car parking, and then you have a fairly large building here that was a workshop. That's the plan of the car parking proposed to be laid out. That's the building as it exists. Existing floor space, which is just a big empty warehouse. This is the most up-to-date plan of the floor space and the division of the uses within the property. So the area in green is an area to be A1 shop use, and that's just over 1,000 square metres. There's a little bit of sui generis hair and beauty use. There's a cafe which is on the ground floor, and that's its associated space. And there's an office that is associated with the operation of the uses within this site, and two ancillary storage areas. You'll also note from this plan that on the first floor it says microbrewery. The microbrewery is not part of the current application, but it is in operation, and we are seeking a planning application from the applicants in respect of that use. So that is not part of the discussion before you today, but it is once we get an application in for a discussion for another day. So this is, I expect a number of you have been to the premises, so this is the site as it stands at the moment, with some signage making it clear that the entrance is in here. There are a lot of signs associated with this property. Again, they don't benefit, the majority of them do not benefit from the from advertisement consent. Your enforcement officers are in discussion with the applicant and the applicant's agent in respect to these signs. A decision has been taken that, awaiting the determination of the application this evening, that will then determine where we go with sorting these signs out. But if consent is granted in accordance with the recommendation to you, the applicant is aware that a number of those signs will have to be removed, as it's a little excessive, and we're unlikely to grant consent for everything that's there at the moment. So this is the cafe area within the building, which is just a small area that's not too delineated from everything else. And then you have a series of little enclosures within the premises. It's divided up into a number of little retail offerings where people sell crafts and antiques and bits and pieces. This is another view into the site. So you've got a variety of different uses and operators in there. Most of them are not manned on a day-to-day basis. If you wish to purchase anything, you take it to a central desk, and then an account is taken as to who has bought what from whom. So this is the just a picture at the end of the drop-in Anchor microbrewery, which is accessible off of Stony Lane South. It has a separate access into the building, but at the moment it is not part of the current application. So that is what you are looking at, a retail use within an old B1, B8 use. You'll notice on your agenda that there have been a number of issues in respect of whether this is an acceptable use in terms of its shopping offering, retail offering in this location. It is not within the prime, the main shopping area of the town. We did actually request, in accordance with your core strategy policies, a retail impact assessment. We haven't had a retail impact assessment that meets all the criteria that we would wish to see, that complies with your local plan policy and the requirements of the NPPF in terms of looking at the sequential impact of the development of this scale on the town centre itself. But because this scheme proposes just over 1,000 square metres retail floor space, and the cut-off for a retail impact assessment in our local plan is 1,000 square metres, but in the NPPF it's 2,500 square metres. It's been held that it only just about requires a retail impact assessment. So we haven't really gone to town on insisting on more information, because I think, to be fair, we were never going to get that information in respect of this scheme. But if you look on page 17 of your report, the final two paragraphs above where it says appraisal, this is the assessment of your policy planning team, that basically says that the retail impact assessment is insufficiently comprehensive to be able to demonstrate that there will be an acceptable retail impact on the Christchurch town centre, and it goes on about deficiencies. But they consider that concerned that an A1 consent on the site would enable another retailer to occupy the site, which could have an unacceptable retail impact on the town centre. That is the conclusion of the policy team. We've then gone through and talked through with them in some detail and looked at the impact of that scheme on the town centre and how we can deal with this operator.
Can I just briefly cease the presentation for a moment?
Yes, we're just going to cease the presentation for one moment, thank you. Thank you. We're just going to lose the company of Councillor Bath, who has realised that she may have a distant but relevant interest in this application. So now that Councillor Bath has left the room, thank you. We can carry on.
Thank you. I think if we turn to paragraph 8.05, where we're looking at the retail impact assessment of this proposal, because this is really the heart of the issue in respect of whether this use should continue or not. It's what's the impact of this development could or does have on the shopping offering in the town centre of Christchurch. We accept that it is insufficiently comprehensive to be able to demonstrate that it will be an acceptable retail impact on the town centre, but we're of the opinion that an unrestricted A1 use which could then be occupied by a different operator in a very different form. So if this went straight from this very small scale, lots of little units, into one larger A1 operator running it as a much more substantive single business, that could be harmful. So we are looking, and you will see from the conditions that we're suggesting this evening, that the concerns about the unrestricted A1 could be addressed by a condition to personalise any consent to the current applicant, and also we're looking to grant or suggest a temporary consent is granted for a further 2 years, because that would enable further work as part of the local plan review that is underway at the moment to assess this site and as part of a larger strategic site as to whether as to what uses should and should not go on this site. It's within the wider town centre area where retail use is considered to be acceptable under certain circumstances. So it has some policy base to its acceptability at the moment, but not a very site-specific basis. But if it is limited to the current occupier and occupied in the current style, and also is limited to a further 2-year consent, we feel that would give us an opportunity to come back and revisit the wider planning uses on the site as part of your local plan review. The other issues raised in the report in terms of impact on residential amenities is very little impact. We're proposing hours of operation that ensure that it doesn't impact on neighbouring properties. The building is tucked away. The building exists. It's tucked away around the back of existing properties. It has no frontage onto Bridge Street itself. So in terms of impact on the character and appearance of the locality, it's very limited. The flood risk issue has also been dealt with. That there's no flood risk considered as part of this proposal. So it is recommended to you with the conditions basically granting a mixed use for the applicant only and for a 2-year period to enable this council to retain long-term control over the site. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mrs. King. That was very clear. Now, am I right in thinking we do not have a speaker tonight? Okay, thank you. So I think the next thing to do is to open it to members for questions to the officer. Can I just say, just before we open it to questions though, that I'd like to stress that having read all this, I'd like to stress that we haven't received the information from the applicant rather than anything else. So, you know, uncertainties are because of that. Okay, members, I think Councillor Geary had a question, was that right?
Now, I always thought that when planning was given
Councillor,
to...
Councillor, can you switch your microphone on?
It's on. It is on. I was always led to believe that one couldn't personalise a consent. I always thought the consent was to the land. Well, I expect I'm wrong. It is permissible in certain circumstances to grant permission to a particular party or whatever. That is, and the benefit of that is, I think, is explained in the reason for condition 1 to prevent the uncontrolled retail use of the site.
Councillor Geary, does that satisfy your question? Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Well, I'm still very concerned because without a retail impact assessment, we're making a decision, and also we're allowing, at the moment until it's sorted out with the enforcement officer, to accept signs which are inappropriate. I'd have thought it'd be better to defer it or refuse it until these were all in place. Can I have an opinion from the officer, please?
With respect to the second matter first, about the signs, they're not part of the current application. So there's no reason to defer this application to the advertisement regulations are totally separate than the planning regulations, and the discussions have been had in respect of how we will deal with those. So, no, there is no ground to defer this proposal. In return to the retail impact assessment, the fact that the proposed floor area is 1,044 square metres and your policy requires a retail impact assessment of a site of 1,000 square metres or more, if they rearrange the internal floor space and rearrange the use of this site to under 1,000 square metres by just extending the size of the sui generis use or extending the size of the cafe, then you wouldn't need a retail impact assessment. So the decision at officer level has been made that because it's just on the cusp of needing an assessment, we have had some information, and they have provided us with some information, but not all the information that you would normally see within a retail impact assessment. And it is within the town centre policy area that does say that retail uses could be acceptable, and within the NPPF the threshold is 2,500 square metres rather than 1,000. We felt that we don't have grounds to refuse this application. We wouldn't substantiate them at an appeal. So with the opinion taken is it's better to negotiate a scheme that is acceptable rather than a refusal and lose control at an appeal.
Thank
And
you
it's
very much for
also
that
proposed to be
comprehensive answer.
a temporary 2-year use as well.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. King. And also, I think 809 has a bit further, doesn't it? That in fact it has been operating, and so far we have not found any impact at all.
That's correct. We've had no indication that it's causing harm to the town centre at the moment.
Right, thanks, Councillor Hall. Vice Chairman, I believe.
Am I correct in thinking that by granting this temporary permission, it will also enable us to enforce various other pieces of information that are required, and we can then put a time limit for them to be provided?
Yes, that's correct. If you look at conditions 3, 4, 5, the other conditions associated with this recommendation to you, at the moment the car parking on the site's rather ad hoc. This requires the parking to be, the customer parking and turning to be as indicated on the submitted plans, so more control over that. Proper provision of storage and disposal of refuse, no external storage. So yes, it is, and also hours of operation. So we can impose an hours of operation condition, and also you will see there's an informative note in respect to the use of the cafe premises. So by granting the consent, you can impose enforceable conditions on the use of the operation.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Councillor Spittle, did you have a question?
Actually, I've got two. First of all, referring to the table on page 11, and you have partly answered part of my question. Is this table movable in so much that can the proportions as shown here, they could be changed? For example, the hair and beauty could be completely finished, and the whole of the ground floor be just retail. That's my first question. Do you want me to come on to my second one now? Or?
I'm happy to answer that.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
they could move slightly, but if you notice the description of the application is for a mixed use. So it's not a retail A1 use only. It is a mixed use for A1, A3, B1 and B8. So that we can condition, if you wish, that the floor spaces as set out in that table are included within a condition if that members felt that would give the more certainty to the level of uses. That would give the applicant the right then, if they wanted to change anything, to come back and put an application in.
Thank you, and I think that is a very relevant point, actually, with the conditions. The other, and forgive me if I have missed it, has there been any report on the entrance from Highways or Dorset County Council at all?
Yes, Highway Authority raised no objection. It's set out, sorry if you just bear with me, bottom of page 13, 703. No objection, subject to condition to secure the provision or intention of parking and turning.
Apologies.
Thank you, Councillor Spittle. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. Just at a point of information, I understood it to say that there is or there has been no retail use. I can well remember accompanying a friend there to collect some material that she'd bought from Mostyn's, and speaking to somebody today, they found that they had purchased, that there had been retail, and quite a well-developed retail section. So I don't know how relevant that is to the statement, but there does seem to have been some established retail use there.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. That was a statement, as you say, not a question. I think we noticed that in some of the letters where it was mentioned that it had not had a retail use before, and I think all of us have at one time or another bought a curtain from Mostyn's when it was Mostyn's. So the retail use has been established. I think the officers would accept that.
There was an ancillary retail use, but part of it was in the adjoining building. So it was not on the application site, it was in this building here from memory when I went in there, because yes, I've been in there too. It's on the adjoining site, which is not part of the current application.
Right, Councillor Grace, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Is the cafe run by the applicant or a separate individual? Also, I thought that anyone running a food business should be registered under the Food Safety Act. And is it the same people that have been running the cafe since the premises has been open? Thank you.
To be honest, I don't know who runs the cafe, but it's an ancillary operation to the main use of the property. Who runs it is not a planning matter, and you will see from the informative note that I mentioned that there is other legislation that controls how the cafe operates. That's not for members this evening to look at, because that's dealt with elsewhere.
Right, members, any more questions? Right, I think we can safely go into debate then. Who wants to lead off? Councillor Hall.
I'm happy to propose a set out with the condition that Councillor Spittle mentioned on that item. I think that'd be sensible to have that in.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Neil.
But my only concern on that summary table, on item 3, it actually says number of stories 2, but we're talking about the ground floor.
I think that's actually more of a question to the officers or the legal team.
Yes, we'll make sure it relates to the ground floor uses only.
The ground floor uses, yes.
On the object.
A sea of hands. Vice Chairman.
I'm sorry, I've just got a question about the condition you're putting in. Is it the ratios that you want put in as a condition? So the ratios of the uses that you want put in as a condition?
Can I come back? I was going to second Councillor Hall's proposal, and yes, I would suggest that the ratios are retained as set out, and then should there be any significant change, then the committee then the applicant comes back. But I see that Mr. Morehouse is looking a bit puzzled.
The amended, as on the updated note, it says amended description to refer to retrospective application as change of use of ground floor. So that is the application that is actually before this committee tonight. Yes.
Sorry, Stephen. And can I clarify that this plan before you, which is the most up-to-date plan showing the uses on the site, is actually annotated with the specific floor areas of each use, and we would suggest that that actually is an approved plan, and we can set out that that is part of the condition. Yeah, so we can condition that the operation is in accordance with the approved plans.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. So, Councillor Hall, your proposal is as set out with that.
Yes,
So-
please, Madam Chairman. That's what I'd like to do.
So is that an amendment, or is that just with an additional condition? Thank you. Have I got a seconder for that? Oh, thank you, Councillor Spittle. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to say I am uneasy about this application. I well remember 2 or 3 years ago when the Meteor application and application for other sites were before the committee. Then it was said, like, the retail impact assessment is gospel and we cannot rely on these because they will damage the town centre, and so on and so forth. Now, however, we have something that to my mind is a lot closer to the town centre. We find that they do not seem to have tried to go through the sequential test, and we have 1 or 2 other factors about the application, such as a proliferation of the advertisements, and of course the fact that we are looking at a retrospective application, and while I know we must consider it exactly as if it were an original application, I still do not like retrospective applications. So, Chairman, however, you've answered my questions, and the officers have also, I think, to the best of their ability, answered the points that were concerning me about the principle of a use here that could then be taken over and developed probably far beyond the parameters that this is set as a much more intrusive and much more influential development. However, the proposal for a personal permission and for a 2-year temporary permission does seem to meet those concerns, and therefore, Chairman, on the basis of suck it and see, let's see what it does to the town centre in the next 2 years till the application comes back, when none of us may be here, of course. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Any more members want to speak to this? Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think that the council are making the right decision. I think that the officers have looked into it. They're putting us in the best situation, and I shall be supporting this application when we go to the vote. I think we're doing the right thing in the right way, even though it is a retrospective application.
Councillor Mrs Jones, are you indicating?
I actually wasn't, Madam Chairman. I think it's the best.
Would you like to put your microphone on then, Councillor?
Think
Thank you.
it is essential that we do put this 2-year limitation on, because they've shown that they're not very keen on providing information, and I think we need to keep on top of this, but I shall support the motion proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Yes, I think it's come out very clearly that our officers have made the best of the information that was forthcoming. Any more around the table to speak? Right, well, we have a proposer in Councillor Hall and a seconder in Councillor Spittle, with the proviso as set out. Can I have a vote, please? Thank you. That was a unanimous vote. Right, we now move on to...
Daniel,
Oh yes, we now move on to get Councillor Bath back in. Yes. Thank you. Welcome back, Councillor Bath. Right, agenda item 4B. Who's leading on this? Mrs. King?
Excuse me, just bear with me and I'll get to this application. This is a council application at Avon Beach at Butterford to raise the middle section of the Avon Beach promenade by 900 millimetres, about 3 feet in old money for some councillors around the room, over approximately 250 metres, about 300 yards, just less than 300 yards, to improve the flood and coastal erosion risk protection. Oh, excuse me. And it's joining the new retaining structure to existing raised defences at either end of the promenade. There is also proposal to widen the promenade by about 1.5 metres. New surfacing, 2 bench seats are provided, and there is also proposal for some very low level lighting. So this is the extent. This is the Avon Beach shop here. This is the Noisy Lobster area. And the proposal is to go from basically the end of the shop all the way up to where there is an area of concrete sort of embankment along the edge of the existing beach. It's an area that is at a lower level than the 2 areas either side. We have one of the council's engineers sitting behind me, so if I get stuck on the technicalities, Mr. Pettifer, I'm sure, can butt in and tell me that I'm getting it wrong. But basically, it is from this wall here, all the way along the promenade to about there. And the idea is that this area here, which is this area here, will be used to store the beach huts that have to be taken down. They're either going to be stored here or on the compound, which I will get to in a moment. The area to be used for the compound for the construction work, this is Avon Beach car park, is the same area proposed that was used when the beach was reinstated a couple of years ago. So it's this area here, so it's accessible off the access leading to the Avon Beach car park. It's an area that the public have associated with a compound in the past, and it's about the widest part of the beach in that location. And you will see from the update sheet there's more information as to how that will be stored and how that compound will be used, just to clarify the points for you there. This is a cross section of what is proposed. So they're basically looking to provide this concrete embankment area on the edge of the beach. This is the beach side. These are the beach huts. This is the edge of the little cliff going up to the car park to the rear. So we're basically infilling this material in here to raise the level of the promenade, and then the area of beach will be reprofiled up to the edge of the concrete retaining structures. And then there's proposal to put some very low level LED lighting along that edge strip there, resurface the promenade, and also to provide 2 new bench seats areas. So this plan took me a little while to work it out because I'm a bit slow, but this area in pink is the application site, and that's the promenade as it stands at the moment. This end is the beach shop, and you've got the 2 sets of steps, one here and one here, that go up to the, actually that's the definitive footpath, is along the top of the cliff up here. And then this plan with the line in green shows the extent of the extended promenade, and then these two little blips here are where there's some proposed seating. And you've then got details of, these are the beach huts, this is the cliff, that's the extent of the existing prom, and these are the plans showing the extent of the proposed area. So it's extended by about 1.5 metres. And then with a series of cross sections showing how what material is going where, how it's going to work. This one is quite useful, although, as it says, not to scale. That beach hut is not that big, as it's slightly out of scale. This is the existing cliff edge. So you will then have a reinforced wall behind the beach huts. This is the line of the beach huts. Then you will have, so this is basically the existing promenade level down here, and some of this is being rather undermined by the sea. So you're going to fill up that sort of level in there, have this concrete toe here, and then re-profile the beach. And the purpose for this whole work is not cosmetic, it is to prevent erosion of this cliff edge here. So you've got a new feature here behind the beach huts to prevent that erosion, and you've got a strengthened area along here, because the promenade at the moment, for those of you who can remember the storm 2014-15, there was those huge areas gouged out underneath the tarmac, big holes. This is to prevent that happening again. This is the lowest part of the most, the area of the promenade that is most susceptible to storm damage. So this is a coastal defence scheme, primarily. That's its prime function, and it just happens to have some beach huts sat on top of it. So these are this is the sort of existing ground level that will be retained, and then the level drops. It's difficult to see on these photographs, but the level does drop. These are the areas where, if you've, for all those members that know quite well, those are the areas that puddle, get wet now. So and the beach is already raised up here to some degree. We've also had concerns in some of the letters about the impact on the trees on the cliff slope here. You will see in the report that actually, in terms of tree loss, it's very minimal. There are some areas where the beach huts are overhung by existing trees, and some of those trees will have to be pruned. But in many places, there's a whole longer line along there where the trees won't be affected at all. And your tree and landscape officers and the council's tree officers have been heavily involved in this scheme prior to it being submitted. So this is the first set of steps closest to the shop area. So you're basically looking to raise the level to sort of up here somewhere. The beach huts will not sort of breach the view from along the existing footpath here. And if you see, these are further along towards the high cliff end, and you'll see that the beach huts here are substantially lower level. So raising them by about 900 millimetres, about 3 feet, will not obscure the views from the right-of-way which runs along the top of the cliff. This is the existing concrete embankment at the far end of the beach, and the proposal is to join the works from that end up to here and fill in that area, raise the beach huts, and raise the beach to provide a much more secure and robust defence against the erosion of, if we go back to these, of this fairly sensitive and quite easily erodable cliff face behind the huts themselves. So that's the reason for the application. And this final plan shows the trees that have been identified for tree works along the area. I think it's only about 2 of them, I think, are actually to come out. The rest are just pruning and some crown lifting. So in terms of the backdrop of trees that you can see along the promenade now, that will change very little as part of this proposal. You'll see that we did have a number of objections to the scheme for a variety of reasons. Some on effect on trees, works to trees will increase risk of erosion. Well, no, not in the way it's being proposed. There has been issues raised about Highcliffe Castle access as an alternative. That is not a matter for members to take into account this evening, the continued discussions over the zigzag. This is the application before you. There is a justified reason for this piece of work in its own right. It is a coastal erosion and a coastal defensive mechanism, so it needs to be separated out from other discussions that are going on about activities on other parts of the seafront in this locality. There's some concern about lighting, there's some concern about impact on wildlife and biodiversity, etc. We've consulted with Natural England. Natural England have no comment on the application. The council did do quite a lot of work on community engagement with the Dorset Coastal Connections project before this application came in, to assess people's views and concerns, and quite a lot of the views and comments that were raised as part of that consultation have been taken on board in the design and proposals that are before you tonight. So we hope that that will demonstrate that the applicant has actually carried out a significant consultation exercise. We have got concerns from the Christchurch Citizens Association about the felling and lopping of trees, and the seating and surfing of promenades needs to be in keeping with the area. Lighting will not enhance promenade, but will encourage antisocial behaviour. I think that's probably not very likely because it's very low level heated solar powered lights that are basically to light your way and show you where the edge of the promenade finishes and the sand starts. So they're not bright, they're not big street lights. And there's also concerns, as you see, from the Christchurch Joint Residents Association. They object is overdevelopment of the site and other matters, most of which are not planning related matters before you. So we've consulted widely, consulted with the Environment Agency, and you'll see from your update sheet that further information has been received in respect of the Environment Agency's comments, and they still raise no objection. They reiterate they have no objections to the approach set out in the flood risk assessment on the scheme. So you've got no objection from the critical statutory consultees, in this instance being the Environment Agency and Natural England, and I think that is an important matter to bear in mind. And the application is therefore recommended to you for approval.
Thank you, Mrs. King. That was a very full resume. I know we have the engineer here. Does he want to speak at all? No, I gather he doesn't want to speak. We don't have a speaker on this at all then. Righty-ho. Well, questions to the officers. Councillor Spittle, is that you?
I do notice that there are several concerns about cyclists going along the promenade. Should this be recommended for approval, or as I know you've recommended it for approval, should the committee pass this, could part of the conditions be that cycling is not encouraged along the promenade at certain times or certain periods at all, for the safety of the general public and bearing in mind there are going to be a lot of children around there, and my concern is for the safety of the children, and particularly the young ones.
No, sorry, we couldn't put a condition on to that effect because it's not really a planning matter in this instance. It's covered by other legislation. It would have to be a bylaw I think, to actually prevent cycling along that stretch of the promenade, which is outside of the terms of this committee.
Can I just say that as far as I know, and I'm down to that beach all the time, that the cycling is for the path above and not the promenade. It is already forbidden. Yeah. That doesn't mean that they don't do it, Councillor Spittle, but it is, I think we've got the bylaw on. Yes, I know it's on the... Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a question, it may well be for the engineer. The resin that we're going to put down as the surface, what's the expected lifetime of that, please?
Again, that's not really a planning consideration. We're determining the applicant's application. We don't normally ask other applicants a similar sort of question. It's a condition that requires the materials and the finishes to come to the planning authority to determine their appearance, and we're looking at their appearance. But part of this purpose for this project is to improve the flood defences and to stop the vulnerability of that part of the promenade from the damage from flooding. So that is part of the engineering offering to you today.
Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. I had one point of information. With the help of colleagues who I know in another life, the public right-of-way runs along the top of the cliffs, not along the promenade at the foot of the cliffs. There is no right-of-way along there, so that is one point that was raised, which I hope is now clarified. Secondly, if I could ask a little bit about the lighting, please. Are we able to get any idea of, are we looking at lights inset into the surface, or are we looking at little bollards, or are we looking at the street lamps with the Doctor Who wings on, or what?
Just to assist you, this cross section here has got timber or polymer composite planking inset with LED lighting, and as I mentioned, it's actually flush in on the edge of the promenade to differentiate the edge of the prom with the edge of the beach. And my understanding is they're little sets set in along that edge.
Thank you very much. And one little comment on the cycling. You could always put up a sign saying cycle way, and that does seem to stop cyclists using it.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Jones. Words of wisdom. Councillor Grace.
Can I just ask, how long will the work take to do if it's passed tonight? Thank you.
It's not a matter that is really before us this evening. We're considering the scheme as in its totality, not how long it would take. But I think there might be some information in the compound and how long it's likely to be there, so we can sort of guess from there.
Right, members, any more questions? Oh, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm still concerned about the height of the flood defence wall, and I'm still concerned with Natural England and the Environment Agency, if they've taken into concern the prediction of rise of sea levels, and I understand that they could be more than they've anticipated. And I just wondered, what their officer's view is.
You're determining the application is submitted to you. If over time it was felt that there was a need for additional works, then that will be the subject to another planning application that will come back before this committee. What you have before you today is an engineered solution that's set out in the information that's submitted with the application to protect that area of vulnerable cliff that currently exists. It's to deal with a current problem. One would hope it's also partially future-proofed.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Mrs Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In 6.3, it talks about the letters of objection received from 17 properties. Does that mean 17 properties in that area, such as Avon Run Road itself?
To be honest, I don't know exactly where they've come from, but going on past history of letters in respect of this area, they're not just local, they're all over. But we just take the comments as they come. They are comments in respect of the planning application. We can't differentiate where they come from. They are just received in respect of this application.
Thank you. It's just that it seemed an unusual phraseology which implied there were properties nearby. Could I also ask about the beach huts? In the past, they used to be demolished every year, or demolish is perhaps the wrong word, but taken down. Is this going to happen under the new regime, or is the idea that we are keeping the beach huts throughout the year?
That's a matter that's not part of this application. It's the matter of the landlord and tenant relationship with the operators of those beach huts. It's not part of the application before you today. The beach huts will have to be dismantled to allow this work to carry on, and that is the only relevance. Yes, the only relevance to you to consider today is the fact that they will be now about 900 millimetres higher than they are at the moment. We looked at the photographs showing, we look at these will be raised about 900 mil, they all will, about 3 feet, but none of them will then go above the height of the footpath. And in this area, you probably won't notice the raised height at all. So that is a consideration, the fact that they are now being raised, but what they will look like long term and where they are is a matter between the tenant and the landlord.
Yes, of course, Councillor Jones, put your microphone on.
On page 28, the Arboricultural Officer talks quite rightly about the bank to the rear being part of an important coastal feature. And it certainly is the only one, I think, along our stretch of coastline, and is something that really contributes to the benefit of the visual beauty of the area. Are we confident that this work on the bank, pruning and cutting, is not going to damage that vegetation?
Yes, because that work was negotiated with that officer, and you will notice in proposed condition 4 there was an arboricultural method statement and a landscape management plan that needs to be submitted to and agreed prior to commencement, and that's to minimise the adverse effect on the vegetation. So those matters will be covered by condition 4.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Jones. Any more questions? Councillor Neil, no?
Yes, I think I am. When we go back to the picture, which is not in scale, yeah, the wall at the back, have we got a height on that? Behind the beach huts?
Yes, the reinforced concrete block wall is between 500 and 600 millimetres high, so no more than 2 feet.
So added to the 3 at the beginning, that's going to be about 5 feet more protection for the bank. I'm happy with that.
Councillor Jones, were you indicating?
If I may, Chairman, through you. To take Councillor Mrs Jones's point a little further, would it be fair to say,
Councillor, is this a question?
well, would it be fair to say, is the preamble to a question surely, would it be fair to say that the increase in height of just over 3 foot will make it less likely that the beach huts would suffer damage if they remained in place throughout the winter?
I think that is one of the aims, yes, that they are less vulnerable to storm damage because of the raising and widening of the promenade, and also reprofiling of the beach. There's information set out within the technical report about the reprofiling of the beach reduces the amount of energy the waves have coming up it. You'd lose me at this point, but basically, yes, they should be less vulnerable to harm.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, through you, was it not the case that the beach huts were previously protected from harm by dismantling and storage in the site of the sunken car park?
That might be the case, but that's not the application before you tonight. The application before you tonight is basically talking about the works to the promenade. Whether those beach huts remain there or not is a matter for the landlord and the tenant. It is not a matter for this committee. This committee isn't determining whether those beach huts stay there all year round or not. It's considering the formation of the improvements to the promenade for a flood defensive measure.
Thank you, Chairman. Incidentally, may I congratulate the officers and thank them for including the, I do want to thank them, for including the presentation in the, publishing it in the, on the internet. It's only 4 chief officers ago that I asked for this to be done, so thank you. It's good things come to them who wait.
Thank you, Councillor Jones, ending on a plaudit. Any more questions for the officers? I would like to just put one point to the officers. On the letters that we had, many of which were not planning considerations, I noted, Mrs King, that we'd got down flawed consultation process. I don't think that's a planning consideration for coastal defence, is it, or is it consultation?
No, I think that might have referred to the community engagement, which was outside of the planning application, but did inform how the application was finally submitted.
Thank you. I think we should really, really take on board that this is coastal defence rather than prettying up the promenade. Thank you. Now, we have a recommendation from the officers to grant subject to all the conditions which we've all read. Do I have a proposer for that? Oh, sorry, Mrs.
Sorry, it helps if you read the notes you've written for yourself. Sorry, Chairman, through you. Could I actually, this is addressed to myself, could I actually suggest we actually delete informative number 1, because that information has now been forthcoming and the Environment Agency have had the opportunity to get the information that they required that we were seeking in that informative note. Apologies for that, Chairman.
Right, thank you. So, as I understand it, we're recommending grant subject to the following, not the informative number 1, but everything else as is. Right, anybody, do we have a proposer? Oh, I'm so sorry. We haven't even had any debate, have we? So sorry. Ward Councillor.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much indeed. This particular application has had its day, as it were, and its debate. As I say, I went to a very robust meeting of a local residents association where this was discussed at great depth. I personally think, and from my point of view, that our engineers, and they are professional people in what they do, have come up with the with a robust, good scheme to help with the underlying problem that we have around this coast of coastal erosion. In their opinion, this will helpfully stave coastal erosion, and as part of our coastal management strategy, I will be supporting this. I would like to therefore say that we go with this as set out, with obviously the slight amendment that you've mentioned, the officers have mentioned. So I'm quite happy to propose. I would also like to say and thank the officers for taking time doing quite a comprehensive consultation, not only engaging with the community at Residents Association. They had open evenings at the beach, and there's a lot of stuff online about this, and a lot of officers have attended a lot of meetings to inform the members of the public. So I'd like to thank the officers for that. And again, I trust, and this all comes down to trust. I trust our engineers. They are the professionals. So far be it from me to say anything else. Thank you very much indeed, madam.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillor Bath.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think Councillor Watts made very good points there, and I would be happy to second the proposal. Councillor Jones also raised some very valid points about the beauty of this area and the walk along Avon Run Road, which is particularly special and individual. And I feel that these sea defences will in fact protect that area from further erosion and protect the vegetation that is there at the moment for future generations to enjoy. The coastal sea defences are necessary, as myself and my fellow ward councillor witnessed after the Valentine's Day storms. There was devastating effect when the sea came crashing in and broke up all of the paving there, and it cost the council a lot of money to repair it at the time, and also the damage that was then done to the banks behind. I think this is necessary, and I believe that the scheme that they've suggested is a good one, and I'm sure that once it's done and in place, it will improve the area and the visual amenity of the area, and also widen the area for people to promenade to and fro, which sometimes can be particularly congested on nice days during the winter and the summer. So I think this is very much needed to protect our coastline, and it'll be very much valued and continue to allow people to enjoy this much loved part of our coastline. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bath. Any more speakers? Councillor Mrs Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is a very beautiful area, and when we moved down many years ago, one of the great delights of my life was going, and it still is, to go to that part of the overcliff and to look down on the beach below and see the view across. And obviously the vegetation along that bank enhancing the beauty and the character. I am concerned though by, yes, you can say this is needed for coastal defence, but I am concerned about the lighting. One of the beauties, and down here we are very fortunate indeed in that in the summer it is extremely light late into the evening, and I cannot see why we need the lighting. However much we say there is not going to be much light pollution, I cannot see why we need this strip of lights. So that is a concern to me, and the fact that I think it will encourage antisocial behaviour. And over the years, that area has been one where crowds of students celebrating the end of exams, the end of term, have gone, and I think if there's lighting, it will encourage.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Jones. Does the officer wish to reply?
On the matter of the lighting, paragraph 8.14 sets out that it's anticipated that it's a low-level light emission, and it's basically to give directional assistance along the presently dark promenade. So they're just low-level lights set along the edge. But I think, talking to our colleague behind, we wouldn't want the scheme to fail tonight on an argument about lighting. So if members really don't want to see the lighting won't have to happen. That is up to you this evening. But it is intended to be it's solar powered, so it's not going to be very strong. It's just there to make sure that people know where the edge of the curb is, effectively to stop them falling over. So there's a little bit of a health and safety issue, but it's not a significant issue.
Thank you, Mrs King. Any more debate on this topic? Councillor, I nearly said, I'm so sorry, Councillor Mr Jones. That was instead of Councillor Mrs Jones. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a lot in this application that I like, and I think we can accept and welcome. We have a history in this borough, unlike some authorities, of strengthening our defences and fighting for every inch of land on the coast, and insofar as this is designed to do that, it is to be welcomed. I have to say I am a little ambivalent about the lighting. On the one hand, that you have the comment that lighting will encourage antisocial behaviour, and on the other you have the argument that no lighting encourages antisocial behaviour. So where do we go? I do wonder why people would want to be wandering down the promenade in the darkness of a February evening, but never mind. I am concerned, very concerned in fact, over one item and one part of this, and it is not, I think, arising from what the officers have put, but I am very saddened that any of our residents, let alone the Joint Residents Association, should believe that we would that we would create this project for the benefit of a private businessman. Yet this has been a view expressed to me personally by residents, and it is obviously a view that has gained some credence. We have a problem if some of the previous actions have led this to gain currency. I'm concerned.
If I could intervene at this particular stage, Councillor Jones, you know perfectly well that this is not a material planning consideration. The issue before this committee is an application which is absolutely of no relevance so far as a landlord and tenant relationship that the council has with the owner of the cafe. It is not a material consideration. It is irrelevant to the proper consideration of this application, as you know full well from your many years' experience of these matters.
And through you, Chairman, from my many years of experience of such matters, I do know that planning, and I just use the word 130 stamp it as an example, is incredibly sensitive in terms of the council's public image. Now, insofar as this is a concern, it worries me, but it does not affect the planning considerations before us. And through you, Chairman, for the reasons that this will enhance the coastal protection and will repair the damage done in the great storm of, I think, 3 years ago, I will support it. but I think I'm entitled to say that I have a concern. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Can I just ask, as a matter of interest, what year was the 130 stand pit bought before the committee?
That, Chairman, I can tell you, came about in 1998 to 1999, and echoes of it were still reverberating round it in the modified by-election this year.
Thank you, Councillor. I think I've made my point that it was 1990s rather than current. Councillor Spittle, you were indicating.
I would just like to refer to what Councillor Jones had said with regard to the necessity for the lights. I, like yourself, Madam Chairman, have actually traversed along that patch of the beach, out of the set area or the months where dogs are not permitted, and it is amazing how quickly dusk does fall. So I feel that those lights are essential, put there simply for safety, and I would suggest that all members of this committee possibly take the opportunity to walk along the beach and appreciate not just the top part in Avon Run Road, but also the bottom or the beach level, because it certainly is an incredible experience and a very pleasant experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spittle. I think the Vice Chairman and myself were just agreeing that yes, we do go down there, and not together, maybe, but yes, it is wonderful down there, and I personally feel that the lights, as they are low, would enhance the experience. Now, Councillor Geary.
I can say quite honestly that I will find those lights extremely useful, because when I'm coming back from Yarmouth and coming into the harbour, I will have a navigational aid.
Councillor Geary. Yes, Councillor Geary. I don't think they're going to be quite that bright, but we'll see, won't we? Any more debate? Oh yes, Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can the engineer or can the officers give us some perspective and give us how bright these lights are going to be? Are they going to be a 100-watt light bulb? Are they going to be the same as a street light? Or are they going to be the same as a Christmas light? Christmas tree light? Can we get some gut feel, please?
Thank you, Councillor Watts. I think we're conferring.
Thank you.
I understand they're going to be low wattage, 10 to 12 watts.
So that's, you will bet, so in other words, in real numbers, so people can understand, you will barely be able to see them unless you're stood on them. Well, if you're stood on them, you won't see them, but you'll literally have to be within 5 to 10 feet to get a decent view of them. So I think all of this, we're going to have an issue with antisocial behaviours. No, we won't. All right, so let's get real here, guys.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Yes. Any more debate on this? Councillor Jones, do you want to come back?
Chairman, I would be very reluctant to stand on 1 watt, let alone 17 of them.
Right, thank you. Now we have a proposer and seconder for this, as set out. Is there any more debate on it? Can we go to the vote? Okay, let's go to the vote, please, members. That's unanimous, as accepted, as set out. Thank you. Right, going back to the agenda, I think we've finished the meeting for tonight. And I thank everybody for attending. Thank you very much.